Hello there, welcome. So in this session, we're going to break down disgust. So many people can get caught in feelings of disgust, feeling disgusted in themselves, disgusted in others, disgusted about the world. And man, is it not a great experience of life to be inside of. And so if we understand what drives disgust, we can catch it and hopefully redirect. And so if we look at, well, what does disgust drive? It's an obsession on imperfection, right? We tend to be focused on, in an obsessive way, on the imperfections of ourselves, of other people, and then we relate to that in the judgment sense of how it should be. And so we're obsessing about imperfection while comparing to the way that it's not. And so the two themes are the way it's not and a focusing on the imperfection in a pretty obsessive way. And so we can do that in regard to any space in life, right? When we look at our body, we can pick apart, all of the different things that don't look the way it should. We can focus on the imperfections of the wrinkles and being a little heavy, and we're aging and our hair's changing color, and we got shorter, and I mean we just go on and on and on. My posture is not as good as it could be, and like if you get obsessed about focusing on the idea of imperfections, and the key word here is it's the idea of imperfection, because not everybody sees imperfections the same way. One person looks at something and go, that's ugly. Another person looks at it and goes, it's perfect, it's beautiful. And so it's not real. When we're looking at that obsession on imperfections, we're comparing it to the way we believe it should be. And a lot of times the comparison of the way it should be isn't even real. Like when people are comparing themselves to the body, they're comparing themselves to some model they saw in a magazine that's been touched up with Photoshop, or they're looking at some AI version of a human that isn't even a real human anymore on Facebook, not even realizing that it's not a human, that's not a real human. It's literally AI built human now that people are watching and following and interacting with. They don't even know it's a real person. And so it's the idea of the way it should be, right? It should be this way. And then we are obsessing about the imperfections, comparing the way we believe it should be. And it's the obsession of that imperfection that then drives a sense of disgust. Or we could do the same thing in relationship or actions or behavior, or the amount of money I make and feeling disgust in myself because I'm not at a place other people are at, and I'm not as far along as other people are. And we can just keep going on and on and on with the way in which we can obsess about imperfections. And so when we allow the mind to obsess about imperfections, that tends to translate and turn into disgust. And the two things we want to pay attention to is, what's the imperfection we're focusing on, number one, but then we need to manage our perception of perfection. What is our perception of the way it's supposed to be? And make sure that as we adopt perceptions of how life should be, or where we should be at, or the way we should look, to make sure that we are adopting real perceptions, number one, because if we are relating to a fantasy perception, then we're never going to become, we're never going to be able to move out of disgust, because we've literally decided we're going to live up to something that actually is impossible to attain. And if you're relating to something that's actually impossible to attain, man, is that a great way to get caught in and stuck in disgust, potentially for the rest of our life, right? And so instead of that, we want to look at these ideas of outcomes we want to achieve and make sure they're real, and make sure they're healthy, and make sure that they're possible. Is it real? Is it healthy? Is it possible? Will it actually give me what I'm looking for? Then if we're going to compare, instead of focusing on imperfections, focus on progress. Focus on the ways in which you relate to that idea of yourself, that outcome you want to achieve, or acknowledge the progress you're making toward that outcome, or what are the actions you're going to take from here to achieve that outcome and to realize it and to fulfill it. And again, all of this has to start with, and I cannot reinforce this enough, making sure that what you're relating to is healthy, is real, and it's possible for you to attain. And then that's the thing you want to obsess about, and that's the thing you want to focus on. And then in terms of moving toward it, focus on the way in which you already emulate that, focus on how you are that. Hey, you know what? I'm a human being. And so I can create that look if I want. I can create that aesthetic. I can create that level of health. I can become that fit. because I have all of the mechanisms to make that possible, and I have access to the knowledge to achieve it. And so even if we're not there yet, we can still relate to it in a way we make it possible for us, right? Relatability, as though we're going to achieve it and we're moving in the direction, and it's really just a matter of time before we fulfill it. And so remember, disgust is the obsession of imperfection, which often coincides with a fantasy idea of how something should be. And so if we eliminate that obsessing on imperfection and replace it with how could this be possible, and make sure we're not focusing on an impossible idea of an outcome, but rather focus on an outcome and an image and an idea that we wish to achieve that's actually, again, real, possible, and achievable, right? It's believable. Then we're gonna relate to life in a very, very different way. And then when we feel disgust, we tend to not treat ourselves very well. We tend to treat ourselves really poorly. We tend to isolate. We tend to actually how do we say, refrain from the things that would actually produce the thing that we want, right? We tend to shy away from it. And so if we can catch ourselves in that cycle of disgust, understand it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing, it's not about you. It's not about us, so to speak. And then we can make that adjustment. Hey, what's the thing I want to strive for? What is it I want to achieve? And what are the ways in which I can make that happen? And then when we catch ourselves obsessing about imperfection, we want to take a pause and redirect. Hopefully this is helpful, and we'll see you again in a future session.